I was trying to figure out a way to maybe maybe help me wrap my mind around workshop framework. It looks like there's a lot of code to go through. So not only would I have a learning curve with the scripting language, but I'm also going to have a learning curve with trying to what I've always called, and actually what I've heard called years ago, is digesting. It's being able to look at code and get a grasp or an understanding of what it's doing. And on top of that, of course, we have the multi-threaded or multi-framed papyrus that's in the middle of all of that. So I was trying to figure out how would I wrap my mind around something. How could I do that to maybe help with some of that? And I think getting down to the like at a microscopic level, I think straining at a gnat as an example would be I don't think that would really, I think that would mask, I think I would miss the problem. I think it would mask the problem, because generally what I would do is I would try to start with globalizing in my mind almost a mental flow chart of what something is doing. And even with this particular application that I'm writing, I don't really have a flow chart for that. But let me show you, let me kind of show you, let me take you through it and see if it makes sense, and maybe if it's possible to maybe put out some types of videos that starts very globally and then kind of narrows everything down. It might be helpful. So let me try this, and this would be like if I was trying to explain an application to somebody. And what I know workshop framework is, it looks like it's made of many different scripts, and even the source I think is up in the megabytes. Okay, so to start out with, in the program, in this particular program, on the very outer layer, you have a main form that is kind of like a, you can have like different types of applications. You can have a shell, command shell, a DLL, entrant library applications, and then you can have a form application. So the way that I kind of see Windows doing this is they open a primary form, and then that is what they use to collect events, such as mouse clicks, mouse movements, keyboard input, things like that. So if you go to like the very core of, let's say, you want to look at the kernel, you only have one keyboard. You technically only have one input at a time. So in the kernel portion of it, you have the actual just hardware I/O. But then you have to know who to give that I/O to, who to give that input. Be it keyboards, be it keyboard input, be it mouse, disk drives, whatever the event, the input event might be. So, which I think the way Windows does it is they'll take a look at input events, go to the active window. So if you've got multiple windows open, multiple forms open, and you type in a keyboard shortcut, that keyboard shortcut goes to the active window. So in a table somewhere in memory, it's got all of these references, which is the form, and of course that has all the controls and the properties of the controls, the colors, the images, all those things. But it knows which one is active, which one is currently active. Not necessarily the topmost, but active. So you're going to have that main form. So given that thought, I had to have a main form to work with, an initial form, and that is the interface. So in this whole thing, I could load these libraries, these DLLs. I could load these separately in their own editor and compile them separate. But I chose to have them all in one I can view them all at one time, and that way I can bounce back and forth to them as I need to. So, given that thought, the way that first event would work is I'm going to have to fire off the application. It's going to have to open an initial form in order for me to capture events. And then, those are standard Windows events and things like that. So the next level would be is how is my application, or how is this? Let's just assume this is not mine. This is just one. How is this broken down? So in the code, I have the main form. This is the front end interface. This is the one that has the processing pipe, which is merely it's just instead of things on demand, instead of you having an event that fires and then it processes that event on demand, it rewrites that event into a kind of a function queue block, and then that function queue block, that block of information, those whether it be parameters are in it, or like his events like a mouse click, will have certain parameters. That is also reformatted into a function, what I call a function info block, and then that block is then put into a queue. So as the program is running, in a sense, the kernel is looking, it's looking to say, is there any events queued up? If there are, let me process them now. Is kind of like how that works. So any event can be processed, whether it's a mouse click or, and it adds an extra layer onto what's already done, window wise, where Windows actually captures the event, and you can go into your application and then literally say, okay, if, on this event. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to take all of those events and put them in a separate external library. So all of the capture events and everything is self-contained. And then once you do something, it then creates its own little function in a queue that a front end could use. Or you might want to ignore them entirely. So you don't even have to use the queue pipe. You don't have to use that event queue. You just don't enable it, and therefore it's not going to put anything in there. It's still going to capture the events. It's still going to receive those window events. It's just not going to do anything with it. So in this front end is responsible for, it's actually responsible for showing a form, and then I have to define the layout of the form, which is this main form right here. It's responsible for populating lists like for example, like group IDs, archives, logs. It populates these lists. This is done within the front end, because this would be, this would kind of be something that the front end might want to show for a specific game. So there are certain things, there's certain information being shown in this front end that the front end is responsible for. But underlying that, there are these series of libraries that are independent. So the utilities library is one of the primary libraries, and I may have to split this out. This contains a lot of custom classes. There's a lot of classes in here. It contains anything from drive classes to file classes to folder classes, which is more than what the Windows classes would offer. It allows me to do a lot more. I just scrolled through a compression class. There's a class, let's see, I think this is the gzip class. I could be mistaken, but let's just kind of buzz through it real quick. Let's see. Yeah, see the gzip lib. So there's a library in here which will actually compress and decompress GZ files. And you can do it in a stream. And it's the same for ziplib. You can, as an example, there's a way to enumerate files in an archive. Let's say a zip file. There's ways to enumerate that. So what I did is I just simply I wrote a simple function for it. Well, I wrote a function for it, archive file list, and then you give it the archive name, and then whatever special flags, which are not required, they're optional. And you give it, let's say, the archive name, and it opens it for you, and it returns a list of files. And that's what it does. So any type of special handling or checks, it was a way of saying, okay, if I have to check for an archive, I need to make sure that the archive name is valid that you're giving me to check. So instead of having that redundant code all throughout a front end, I put it in a DLL, and then I wrapped that simple enumeration around things that check it. Things that maybe let you do a pattern search. Maybe you could do a pattern search. I don't think that's in here, but maybe you could do like a pattern search or something. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, because I think this particular function just shows everything that's in the list, but not to get specific. So in this utility library, it handles access to drives, access to lots of different things. It's got dozens and dozens of custom classes in it. It has custom classes that let you create. These are all the same. Like all of these forms, even though the data is different, what you're seeing is different data. It is the exact same routine. It is the exact same functions and methods, the exact same event capturing. That's why when you right click a menu, you get the menu. That's just it's all the same thing. Because in a sense, even though it's a different form, it's the same functions, just different data. So to look at this, I would say like this library here handles all of the utilitarian functions. It handles checking on disk drives, like I said, things like that. Then you have the user library. So this library is simply responsible for populating a structure with user information. It'll save user information. So when I save a session, when this session is saved, let's say I'm in Fallout 3, and or better yet, I'm in Fallout 4. If I was to exit this application and then fire it back off, it looks to files, session files that were created by this library here, this user library. So therefore, it can say, okay, what's the last game you were modding and playing? And you say, oh, it's Fallout 3. Well, then these are the settings you used for Fallout 3. So you can kind of have just something. So that's what it does. It gives it kind of gives you control over user data. And then, of course, there's the games library. And this library is responsible for populating. There's game structures, and it needs to populate the game structure with information about these games. That's what this is. So even though this is a list of games, this actually comes from this library here, from the games library. So if I call it a report, it's just a report. Again, this report is absolutely no different than any other list you see. It uses all the same. It's the same exact methods. The only difference is the data. And in some cases, I want to add color, which is outside of the normal color you would see for, like, example here, like if you set a warning flag for a particular column, I believe they call it sub-item. So in a list view, you have items, which is your primary item, and then you have sub-items. Well, I made a custom list view so I can add more information to these items. One of them is flags. So if the warning flag is set for a sub-item, when it generates this list, it will automatically put it as yellow. Whatever warning is, whatever I have warning defined as a style, that's what it's gonna put here. These are custom colors that I have to go in the front end. I have to go in and literally say, okay, once the data is created, once I say I want to show this information in this particular report or this particular list, once it returns that back to me and say, this is the data that you're going to add, I have to then take a look. It's a post look at it and say, okay, then I'll, if certain fields exist, then I need to change their colors to this. And that's what you see here. So then once that's done, that is passed to the literal display method, and then the display method takes all of that data and then it literally creates this. And there's a bleed through here. If you've noticed, there's a bleed through here where I have two routines, one for the item, one for the sub item, and the sub item is not. I'm using the wrong clipping value. It's the wrong bounding value. So it's showing the full name instead of clipping on a certain bounds. That's all that is. And I haven't even refactored that routine yet. So that's what the utility library does. It has forms in it. It has all that stuff. It has lists in it. Lots of different custom methods and classes that made things a little bit easier. That's kind of like what you see when you're over in here. You'll actually see, miscellaneous QOP code. So the majority of the front end is written calling methods that exist in all of these other libraries. There is some code that is unique to it, but most of it just calls functions. If I could create a function for it, I did. If I could put it over here in one of these libraries, I did. But that's what the game library does. I mean, that's what this does. It simply lets you define games. It lets you define files that are associated with games, like a sorting file. There is a sorting file, and there's other configuration files that it manages. They're all set up to automatically check. So if, for example, a configuration file changes, each one of these libraries will check to see, is that one of mine? And if it is, then it will make an attempt to reload that library. That's where you see the dynamic of being able to change things on the fly, and then you'll see the actual interface reflected. And that way you don't have to exit out and load back up. I thought that was kind of a pain, but that's what the game library does. Load orders is the exact same thing. It's responsible for handling load orders, importing, exporting, loading, saving, and any information that's contained within a load order. This is the library responsible for that. The reporting on load orders, I think there's a load order history over here. This comes from, let's see, this right here. This report comes, this report right here comes from the load order library. And that's what it does. That's simply what it does. It converts, it makes an attempt to convert different formats into what it considers its native format, a common format. But that's what this library does. This ESX utility, this library's sole purpose is simply to open, close, and parse plugins. That's its only job. That's what this thing does. It creates a dictionary. See, open, close. It's very simple. It's what it does. That's its only purpose. The BSA utility, it's just like the ESX. Its purpose is to open and close BSA archives. And part of that is when you open and close it, part of the data that is returned when you open an archive is it automatically extracts the file names. That's what you saw over here when I did, let's see, on the archives. Let's go over here to archives real quick. If you go over here and take a look where I do like a more information, that's what this is. This merely is the open. It's just the open routine. And the open routine needs to handle, when it opens it, it needs to get the version of the BSA and the type of BS, the BA2, the type it is. It needs to get that information in order to know which formats, how to parse it. So that's all this does. So once I open, all I have to do is simply open an archive, and the file list is right there for me to use. So it returns that. If it can't open it, it'll tell me, and it won't send back. It'll send back an empty list. Scripting is this scripting, again, these libraries are all independent of the interface. However, the majority of all these libraries have the utilities library as a dependency because that is what's used to load files, access files. As an example, if you're trying to load a text file that has been compressed with gzip, it'll see that and it'll automatically decompress it for you. So I tried to automate a lot of things and then layer it together. But the scripting library is basically it's just a real quick scripting language. It is nothing special. It does have nested if then else statements. You can nest if then else statements. It does have the ability to set variables and do condition checks, things like that. Although it's a little bit different of a language that it's more of a parameter-driven language rather than a programming language in and of itself. But it gives me at least an initial point to where I can, maybe later go back in and change the code and go from simple math to more complicated math. I don't really need to do really complicated math. It's not really a programming language in and of itself, but you can see where it does these. These are the commands that you can actually have, and it lets you do some interesting things. The reporting library is just that. Its job is to generate reports. So the problem I had initially with the main application was it was too big. It's simply too big. Like I think the total number of lines I've got in all these libraries is like close to 500,000. It's crazy. It really is crazy. But it really is. Like I think the worst one is this. I think if we go all the way to the bottom, see this one library has 168,000 lines in it. A lot of it is like comments and spaces, things like that. But what the reporting library did is let me this one is actually and it has a lot of these dependencies. Like I think it has a dependency on games, and it gave me the ability to have a more finely grained reporting system on data that is within the front end. So it's not something a person would normally need all the time. So if I've got like for example, it's actually this over here. It's actually this right here. If you look at reporting, it's the reporting module. That's all this does. So this right here, in and of itself, is a report that literally says it calls the reporting. It calls this simple. It just calls this reporting module and says, okay, give me a list of all available reports. And that's what this does. These are configured by the user. So it just looks at a reporting configuration file, and these are the names, and these are how I've organized them. It sorts them however you provide a sorting key. So these are all like under certain categories. And that's what this does. So, it makes it easy to show master lists. Now, menus for these are in the menus. Those are hard coded in the menus. It doesn't matter what form it is or what library it comes from. Menus are all the same thing. It's all the same text files, whether it's a dynamic menu, common menu, or a very, very specific menu. It's a specific menu for a specific form. And that's all that does. Networking is what you see here. The networking library allows you to have multiple servers open. It's just a packet server, and it will send packets to and from different users. The packets are the packets, the connections to the server are, it's not peer-to-peer. So there is a certain overhead I put into it to protect peer-to-peer IP addresses if it's ever used for that. It's not really designed to be commercial. It's not really designed to be anything major. It was just kind of, honestly, it was kind of like, hey, can I do this? And then I sat down one weekend and I thought, I just threw it all together and I thought, okay, yeah, we'll just roll with this. But it has a lot of things built into it that you would normally see in servers and things like that. Again, that absolutely needs to be debugged and tested, and it needs to be put to use to see how it applies, and code needs to be adjusted accordingly. But that's that. So So what I was kind of wondering is there a way to get Workshop Framework to where you could say, this is the main script, this, to show me this is what fires. In a video like this is what fires. This is the thing that initially fires off. And, this is what it does. Because I have a feeling that over the years, it's gotten complicated. That what started out very simple, a very simple, scripting or application has gotten complicated with a lot of things extending things, extending things, extending things. So is there a way to actually do that? Not to teach me how to mod or anything like that, but to give me an overview so I can wrap my mind around exactly what is going on with the individual scripts. What is firing when? And sometimes what I found out is by talking through something, you can actually learn more about it. And it all of a sudden something will dawn on. Like I've done this, and I've gone back to listen to something that I've recorded, and I'm like, oh yeah, I just thought of something because it actually, jogged my memory. So that's kind of like what I was wanting to see, something that would kind of give me, and just to kind of give a little for people that program, this messages system, this right here is what you see over here, but it's different. This, the messages section does this. It's this over here. Because this is a list box. It's not a list view. But this is going to be changed so that the messages, this whole section here, is going to disappear. This section here is going to disappear. This is code I wrote many, many, many years ago. So you could tell the formatting is different. The way that I did things was different. I tried to go back in and clean it up, but it's drastically different. So you can see how, so all this is all going to be incorporated in the new functions that are put over here. That's what this is. Other forms, there's almost nothing to this. This is where I define forms that this is going to go away too. These are all going to be incorporated in that forms designer code. See, this is just a little credit thing that'll pop up, and that might be the only thing in here is just the credits. It's just a little credit window, but all that now can be incorporated over into the forms side over in here. So this thing can disappear and be absorbed over in here with pretty much the same functionality. Without having to have all this extra code. And these are extensions, which allows me to extend certain functions. So like I could have like, you know how you'll have like a text string and then you'll have a trim. You'll have a period at the end of it. Like let's say you have my text dot trim, and then you can trim like an end character off. Well, that's an extension. And that's what these are. These allow me to create my own extensions. And I don't really necessarily have to have these. I just played around with the idea. I thought, oh, cool, I'll throw this in here in case anybody is curious about how to do it. It's all in here. It'll be documented. Again, you can see where this type of comment looks way different than, let's go up here some. Let's buzz up this way some. Than, let's say, this type of comment. So you can see the difference, this function, and then you've got more information that can be passed down. So this is the new way I'm doing it, and then this was the previous way. So that's kind of like what, and you have the splash screen. So the splash screen is responsible. This is all outdated code. It does work, but it has to be cleaned up and it's outdated. This will stay as it is, because this is how when the main form opens, there is a window feature that allows you to have a splash screen. You know, that little thing that pops up that says like Word document version XXX, and all of a sudden then it pops up and lets you type in text. I use it to create a little animation. Well, not the animation, but I use it to create the title that you see when the application launches. I'll show you the splash screen here, and you can kind of see it. So we'll just kind of kill this, and then we'll fire back off. Now, sometimes it'll compile and launch. Sometimes it won't, which is interesting with the compiler. So that time it didn't. So it compiled clean, but it just doesn't want to fire it off. And it does it a second time. And I think it's how I'm linking the libraries kind of confuses it. This is a splash screen. That's the splash screen. And then once everything is loaded to a certain degree, in other words, once Windows says the main form is loaded, then I don't need the splash screen and it closes. But that is what animates. That's what that is. So that kind of helps to explain on a overall thing what the libraries are doing, and that's kind of like what I was hoping to see, a way to compartmentalize what the scripts are doing, so when we see unexpected behavior, such as objects that are not being deleted or removed, is that because somehow the table is getting mixed up? Somehow, not necessarily that it's a data thing, but it might be the way the VM is handling the scripting or something like that. It gives an overall viewpoint without trying to get down. Because if you get down to too much detail, too much nitty gritty, then you kind of miss the bigger details. And that's kind of like what I was looking for. I was hoping that maybe you or somebody could, when they have the time, if you have the time, do something like this, which can give me a visual, almost like a visual aid, to say this is what the script is doing. And that might make it a little bit easier to digest what's going on. So that's kind of like what I wanted to show you. I definitely did not mean this video to go this long, but I was just trying to take time to kind of show you how I was, like I would try to explain something, and that kind of shows how I understand things or how I look to understand things. So maybe that might help getting me up to speed somehow, rather than, because I really honestly don't have time to look at a bunch of scripts and then try to figure out, because then I'm still going to have 1,001 questions. Whereas what we're really trying to do is solve what's causing the problem, and the problem could be in the code, but without being able to isolate the processes that's going on. What is going on? What's the flow? What's the actual workflow? What's the data flow? What's the process flow? To see where possibly it's getting it's getting sidetracked or something. That would be because like, oh, it should be doing this at this point, but yet it's done something else. So that tells me which scripts to look at. All right, so yeah, I just wanted to kind of toss that out there and see if there was a way to get something like this. If so, great. If not, no big deal. But that's kind of like what I wanted to share. All right, so I'm gonna have to head off here and get some things done. And yeah, just if you can, great. If not, I completely understand.